In the dust of ancient Mesopotamia, between the rivers Euphrates and Tigris, a civilization was born that remains a mystery to this day. The Sumerians, creators of the first script, the first laws, and the first city-states, left behind thousands of clay tablets. On those tablets are stories that bear no resemblance to ordinary myths. They are systematic, detailed, and often read like historical records. And in these records, the name Anunnaki appears again and again. When researchers first deciphered cuneiform, they expected descriptions of gods, legends, and rituals similar to those of the Greeks or Egyptians. Instead, they came across lists of kings, chronologies of rulers, and stories that resemble history more than fairy tales. These texts state that some rulers lived and reigned for thousands of years. How to explain that? Historians dismiss it as symbolism, exaggeration, or perhaps a mistranslation. But what if the Sumerians were recording reality? The Anunnaki were described as beings who descended from the sky, not as immaterial gods, but as those who physically came among people. Their appearance was different, tall, strong, with an authority that commanded respect. Strange objects appear in their hands that are out of place in that era. Small pouches, items resembling watches, symbols that look technical. According to Sumerian myths, humans were not originally their equals. Man was created as a tool. The Anunnaki allegedly needed helpers to do their work. It was not a miraculous creation from clay, as we know from fairy tales, but an intervention into beings that already existed. Into the primitive human they placed a part of themselves, a genetic seed that changed his abilities. Thus, a new kind of being was born. Imagine the contrast. While the surrounding world was inhabited by people who fought for survival, gathered fruits and hunted, between the rivers of Mesopotamia, cities with palaces, temples, and irrigation systems rose up. It was as if knowledge suddenly appeared there that exceeded the capabilities of the age. Where did it come from? According to the Sumerians themselves, from the Anunnaki. The names of these beings have been preserved: Enki, Enlil, Ninurta, Ninhursag, and others. Each had his or her tasks and character. Enki was a teacher, a protector, associated with water and wisdom. Enlil, by contrast, was severe. He saw humans as noisy and disobedient experiments. Ninhursag was associated with life and birth. These stories are not written as fables, but as records of events. The greatest mystery remains the so-called Sumerian king list. This document describes how individual rulers assumed power and how long they reigned. According to the records, some ruled for tens of thousands of years. Modern science says this is metaphorical, but what if it is not? What if the Anunnaki truly had life cycles incomprehensibly long to humans? From here springs the theory that the Anunnaki were not merely mythological concepts, but real visitors. The best-known interpretation is that of writer Zecharia Sitchin. According to him, they came from the planet Nibiru, a world with an extremely long orbital period that returns to Earth once every thousands of years. When their planet approached, they descended to Earth. The reason was said to be the mining of gold. They allegedly needed it for their atmosphere to maintain conditions suitable for life. Gold was available on Earth, but the work was too arduous. Therefore, they created humans as servants. Sumerian texts indeed describe the mixing of blood and the giving of life. What if this is an ancient record of a genetic experiment? It is no coincidence that the human species differs so dramatically from other animals. Evolution explains part of the story, but the leap that occurred remains a question. What if it was the Anunnaki who intervened here? The Sumerians described not only their deeds, but also disputes among them. The Anunnaki were not united. Enki was to protect humanity, while Enlil sought its end. These conflicts led to the decision about a flood. According to the texts, Enlil decided that humanity must disappear because it was too noisy and rebellious. Enki, however, warned one man who built a boat. The story of surviving the flood is known to us from the Bible. There, the main hero is named Noah. How is it possible that different cultures on opposite ends of the world share the same motif? The Indians speak of Manu, the Greeks of Deucalion, the Sumerians of Utnapishtim. Always it is about a chosen one who survives thanks to the warning of a benevolent being. And always there is a higher power in the background that decides to destroy the world. If the flood was a real event, it could mean that it was a conscious intervention. Not a random catastrophe, but an act of decision. And that would mean humanity really was in the hands of beings who felt like rulers and experimenters. But the story of the Anunnaki does not end here. Their presence is carved into stone, written on tablets and hidden in symbols. On reliefs they hold pouches whose meaning remains unclear to this day. Their symbol, the winged disc, suggests something more than merely a sign of power. It looks like an object capable of movement across the sky. For people of that time, it must have been a sacred image. For us, it might be a clue that technology played a larger role than we admit.
When archaeologists began to uncover reliefs and statues of ancient civilizations, they did not realize how many questions they would raise. In Mesopotamia, in the heartland of the Sumerians and Akkadians, the motif of winged beings with authoritative bearing and strange objects in their hands repeatedly appears. The most mysterious of these is the small pouch. This detail could be easily overlooked, but it is no coincidence that it appears again and again in the same shape, held the same way. And what is most peculiar, the same symbol was found among the Maya and the Aztecs, thousands of kilometers away and thousands of years later. How is it possible that cultures with no contact depicted an identical object? Official science says it was a seed container or a fertility symbol. But would different civilizations across continents really depict an ordinary bag so uniformly? Or was it something sacred and inscrutable to them, which they faithfully copied? Some researchers argue it could have been a tool for transmitting energy, something like a power source the Anunnaki used. Others go further. They see in it a kind of portable device, a technology that for people would have appeared magical. Equally fascinating is the winged disc. In Sumerian art, it accompanies the Anunnaki as a sign of their power. Historians see it as a symbol of the sun god. But the shape is peculiar, technical. It resembles an object that moves, perhaps even flies. Egyptian pharaohs claim descent from the gods. The ancient Incas believed their rulers carried the blood of the sun. Across the world, the idea recurs that those who rule are not like ordinary people. From this arises the theory of royal blood. According to it, world elites guard their genealogies, ensuring their lines do not mix with ordinary people. History shows marriages between cousins and distant relatives, done to preserve the purity of the line. Why? Perhaps because they were preserving more than wealth. Perhaps it was a genetic heritage that stretches back to the Anunnaki. If that were true, world elites would not only trace their ancestry through history, they would carry within them the memory and inheritance of beings who once came from the sky. And that would explain their obsession with power, control, and rituals incomprehensible to ordinary people. Just look at some modern symbols. The black cubes that appear in various religions and public spaces have a peculiar connection to Saturn, a planet associated since antiquity with time, control, and dark power. Strange, too, is how Anunnaki symbolism repeats across ages, in the hands of elite societies, in architecture, in films and music, as if someone took pains to ensure the memory did not vanish, only transformed. But let us return to the stories themselves. The Anunnaki were not unified. The texts describe disputes among them, sometimes violent,
sometimes conciliatory. Enki, protector of humanity, and Enlil, who wanted to destroy us. These conflicts left a deep mark on human culture. The biblical flood story is one of them. But what if other biblical motifs have their roots here as well? When we read about angels who descended to earth and joined with human women, producing races of giants called the Nephilim, the motif resembles the Anunnaki mixing with humans. And when we read about the Tower of Babel, built to reach the sky and suddenly halted, is that not a tale of punishment for trying to approach the gods? All these texts may be echoes of real events, events in which people lived under the supervision of beings who posed as gods but were mortal, only far more powerful. What if the Anunnaki never fully left? What if their influence survived in ruling lines, in symbols, and in rituals that persist to this day? And what if their return is only a matter of time? If Sitchin's theory of Nibiru contains even a fragment of truth, then that planet could approach again. It would mean the Anunnaki would return. The question is whether they would come as protectors or as rulers who would again claim what they consider theirs. And if they never left, then we need not wait for their return. Perhaps they are still here. Perhaps they watch how their experiment unfolds. Perhaps they hide in places ordinary people never see. And perhaps they watch through the eyes of those who stand at the pinnacle of power. And the most terrifying question is, what if we are still only an experiment, the result of which is watched by those who once created us?